The Aerolux Aviation Club wasn't the kind of place where ordinary people wandered in. With its polished oak bar, leather chairs, and walls lined with photographs of fighter jets and private planes, it was an exclusive haven for the elite. Every evening, the club filled with men and women who wore flight jackets like badges of honor, pilots. Some were retired Air Force officers, others were wealthy private jet owners, and a few were young hotshots training for international airlines. Tonight was no different. Laughter echoed under the chandeliers as polished boots tapped on the marble floor. Tales of skydiving, combat maneuvers, and luxury flights circled the room. In the middle of it all, a group of pilots sat around a large table, their voices carrying louder than the rest. At their service was Amara Johnson, a young black waitress in a crisp uniform, moving quietly between tables with a tray balanced effortlessly in her hands. Amara approached with a polite smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Would you like to see the specials?" The youngest of the group, a cocky pilot in training with perfectly styled hair, smirked. "Specials? What would you know about specials? Do you even know what a cockpit looks like?" The others laughed. Another, older pilot leaned back in his chair, voice dripping with arrogance. "Sweetheart, stick to serving drinks. Leave flying to the men who actually know the sky." Amara's fingers tightened slightly on the tray, but her expression remained calm. She dealt with this before. The sting of being dismissed, mocked for her skin, her gender, her job. It was nothing new. But tonight, something inside her stirred differently. The men continued, their laughter growing louder. "You see, flying is for the elite," one said, gesturing to his embroidered jacket. "It takes brains, guts, and training you wouldn't understand." Another added mockingly, "She probably thinks a jet engine is just a big fan." More laughter. Their arrogance filled the room. Other guests looked over uneasily, but no one interrupted. After all, these were pilots, heroes of the sky, untouchable in their pride. Amara took a slow breath. She set down the tray on their table, her eyes steady. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the table like a blade cutting through laughter. "You know," she said, "the thing about altitude is, the higher you climb, the thinner the air gets. And if you don't respect that, even the strongest pilot can pass out and come crashing down." The smirks faded, a few raised eyebrows. The room had gone still, all eyes turning toward the young waitress who had just spoken like she belonged. In a flight briefing, Amara leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Respect isn't about who sits in the cockpit. It's about how you carry yourself when others are watching, and when they're not. For the first time that night, the pilots had no clever reply. Their arrogance had met a truth they couldn't laugh off. That single moment, one waitress, one fearless line, left a room full of elite pilots speechless. They didn't know it yet, but Amara Johnson's knowledge of the skies and the wisdom of her words would soon challenge everything they thought they knew about respect, skill, and true greatness. After finishing her shift at the Aerolux Club, Amara stepped out into the cool night air. Her sneakers were worn thin, her back ached from hours of carrying trays, and her apron still smelled faintly of spilled wine. Yet her head remained high. The laughter of those arrogant pilots echoed faintly in her mind. Their words could have broken someone else, but not her. She had been underestimated all her life. Tonight was just another reminder of the battle she fought daily. Clutching her small shoulder bag, she began the long walk back to her neighborhood, past the glowing high-rises and into the streets, where neon faded into cracked sidewalks. Her apartment was modest, peeling paint, squeaky pipes, a flickering light in the hallway. But inside, it carried warmth. The walls were lined with old photographs, and on the shelf by her bed sat a framed picture of her father, Captain Elijah Johnson, a military mechanic who had once dreamed of becoming a pilot. He never got the chance. An accident on the base took him when Amara was only 12. But before he left, he planted a seed in her heart. He used to point at the sky with her on the porch at night. "Someday, baby girl," he'd say, "you'll fly higher than all of them. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words became Amara's compass. Despite working long shifts, Amara spent every spare hour with her nose in aviation books, manuals borrowed from the library, second-hand guides bought with saved tips, online courses she scraped together money to take. Her notebooks were filled with diagrams of engines, equations of lift and thrust, sketches of cockpits. She studied aerodynamics like her life depended on it. And it did, because knowledge was her only ticket out. But while her peers applied to flight schools, Amara's reality was different. Tuition fees were impossible. Every dollar she earned went toward rent, groceries, and helping her younger sister, Naomi, finish high school. Dreams of the sky often clashed with the weight of survival. To the pilots at Aerolux, she was just a waitress in a starched uniform. But they didn't know the truth. Amara could name every aircraft hanging in the club's photographs. She knew which engine models powered them, their fuel capacities, and even stories of the missions they'd flown. Sometimes, when the restaurant was empty, she'd stand beneath the framed pictures and whisper softly. One day, she believed it. Even if the world did and single quotes T. One night, Naomi found Amara still awake, her desk lamp glowing faintly as she scribbled notes on aerodynamics. "Amara, you need sleep," Naomi said gently. Amara smiled warily. "Sleep won't pay for flight school. Knowledge might." Naomi hesitated. "You think those pilots at the club will ever take you seriously?" Amara's eyes hardened. "I don't need their permission. I just need my chance." The next evening, Amara returned to Aerolux, ready for another shift. The same group of pilots was there, louder than ever. But when she approached, their laughter faltered for a split second. A faint memory of the line that had silenced them last night, she noticed, but said nothing. She simply poured their drinks with grace. What they didn't realize was that the woman they mocked carried within her not just knowledge, but fire. A fire that would one day burn brighter than their arrogance. Amara Johnson wasn't just a waitress. She was a dreamer, a fighter, and a student of the skies, quietly preparing for a destiny the world kept trying to deny her. And soon, the same pilots who mocked her would discover that beneath her apron and trays lived the mind of someone who understood the sky better than they could imagine. It was a Friday night at the Aerolux Aviation Club. The pilots were in their usual corner, drinks in hand, boasting about their latest flights. Amara moved between tables, balancing trays as always. One of the pilots, the young trainee named Connor, waved her over with a cocky grin. "Hey, waitress, tell me, do you even know what keeps a jet in the air? Or do you think it's just magic?" The table erupted in laughter. A couple of nearby patrons glanced over, uncomfortable. Amara set down their drinks calmly. Her voice was steady, but her words carried weight. "Its lift," she said, "generated when air moves faster over the curved upper surface of the wing than the lower one. Pressure difference creates upward force, not magic, just physics." The laughter died instantly. Connor blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, you actually know Bernoulli's principle?" Amara gave a small shrug. "Anyone who's read an aviation manual would." One of the older pilots leaned forward, testing her. "All right then, genius. What's the stall speed of an F-16? Without missing a beat, Amara replied. "Depends on altitude and configuration. But clean, at sea level, around 130 knots. The table went quiet. She had been precise, too precise for a mere waitress. The men weren't ready to admit defeat. Another pilot smirked. "Okay, Miss Wikipedia. What about a twin-engine failure procedure in a Boeing 737? Amara's eyes didn't waver. "Maintain best glide speed, attempt restart, and, if unsuccessful, set up for forced landing. Priority is always aviate, navigate, then communicate." Pilots forget that order sometimes. A stunned silence fell. Even the bartender, wiping glasses nearby, paused mid-motion. Amara leaned in slightly. "You asked," I answered. For the first time, there was no laughter. The cocky grins faded, replaced by something new, respect, however reluctant. One of the older pilots finally said quietly, "How do you know all this?" Amara straightened, her tray steady. "Because I study, because I listen. Because just because I wear an apron doesn't mean my mind can't soar higher than the sky. You think you own." Her words cut sharper than any insult could. The exchange spread quickly. Other members of the club whispered about the waitress who had silenced the pilots with technical precision. Some dismissed it as luck. Others began watching her more closely, curiosity in their eyes. That night, for the first time, the pilots didn't laugh when Amara walked away. They watched her in silence, their arrogance shaken. Later, in the locker room, Connor muttered to the older pilot, "How the hell did she know all that? She's just a waitress." The older man shook his head. "Maybe she's more than that. And maybe we've been fools to judge her by her uniform." The men who mocked Amara Johnson had just witnessed a glimpse of the truth. She wasn't just a waitress. She carried the knowledge of a pilot, the passion of a dreamer, and the courage to speak it aloud. But they hadn't seen anything yet. Because soon, when real danger struck, it would be Amara's voice, not theirs, that would matter most. A few weeks later, the Aerolux Club hosted its annual aviation gala, a grand affair where elite pilots, airline executives, and even a few government officials gathered. Chandeliers glimmered, violins played softly, and champagne flowed freely. Amara worked the floor as always, balancing trays while weaving between tuxedos and gowns. She tried not to notice the pilots from that fateful night, though she caught their glances. Their laughter wasn't as loud now. Their arrogance had dulled into something else, watchfulness. The night's peace shattered with a loud commotion near the airstrip behind the club. Guests rushed to the windows as alarms blared. A small private jet, meant to give demonstration flights for VIPs, was sputtering on the runway. Its engine had failed during takeoff, and the second sputtered dangerously. Panic rippled through the crowd. The pilots in the room turned pale. One muttered, "If both engines die at this speed," another snapped, "It'll never clear the strip. They're going to crash." Shockingly, the same pilots who boasted endlessly about their skills were frozen. They argued, voices overlapping, but none moved. Connor, the young trainee, stammered, "There's nothing anyone can do from here. It's over." Amara's chest tightened. She could see the jet struggling, nose dipping, pilots inside fumbling. But she also saw something the others missed. A chance. Amara bolted toward the club's emergency radio station, her heart pounding. She grabbed the mic before anyone could stop her. "Control. This is Amara Johnson at Aerolux," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear. "Tell the pilot to maintain best glide speed and keep nose level. There's a grassy field just south of the strip. If they bank shallow now, they can set it down." The control officer blinked at her, stunned. But her conviction left no room for doubt. He relayed the instructions immediately. The jet, teetering on disaster, responded. It banked gently, engines silent, gliding like a wounded bird. The grassy field loomed ahead. With a hard bump and a spray of dirt, the aircraft skidded across the ground, rough but safe. Silence fell in the club. Then gasps, then thunderous applause. The passengers inside stumbled out, shaken but alive. Amara exhaled, her knees trembling, but her eyes burning with determination. Connor and the others stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by awe. One of the older pilots whispered, "She just saved them. She just saved them all." Amara met their eyes, calm and resolute. Flying isn't just about ego or uniforms. It's about knowledge, respect, and keeping calm when lives are on the line. Not one of them dared to laugh. Not one of them had the courage to argue. Later that night, as the crowd buzzed about the miracle, the chief of the club approached Amara. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice full of gravity, "I've never seen presence of mind like yours. If you want it, I'll personally sponsor your training at the Aviation Academy." Gasps filled the room. Amara's heart raced, tears welling in her eyes. For years, she had dreamed of this moment, and it had finally arrived. Not by chance, but because she dared to speak up. The same pilots who once mocked Amara Johnson now stood in silence, humbled by the waitress who had saved lives with her knowledge and courage. And as the night ended, one truth became undeniable. She wasn't destined to carry trays. She was destined to carry wings. By dawn, every aviation news outlet in the city was buzzing. Headlines read, "Waitress saves jet from crash with calm instructions." Amara Johnson, the unsung hero of Aerolux. The Aerolux pilots who once mocked her avoided the spotlight, their arrogance replaced with shame. For the first time, they admitted they had been wrong, deeply wrong. At a press conference held in front of the airfield, officials praised Amara. The passengers who had been saved shook her hand with tears in their eyes. Cameras flashed as the club president placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "this young woman's quick thinking prevented tragedy. Today, we recognize not just her courage, but her extraordinary knowledge. It's time we give her the chance she's always deserved." He held up a document, a full scholarship to the Aviation Academy. The crowd erupted in applause. Amara's hands trembled as she accepted it. For years, she had carried books in the shadows. Now the world carried her forward. Later, Connor and the other pilots approached her. Their heads bowed. Connor's voice cracked with humility. "I was wrong about you," he admitted. "About everything. You're more of a pilot than I'll ever be." "I'm sorry." Amara looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "Respect isn't about apologies. It's about what you do next. Learn from this, and never mock someone's dream again." He nodded, eyes downcast. The lesson was burned into him forever. Weeks later, Amara stood on the tarmac, no longer in a waitress's uniform, but in a crisp flight cadet jacket. The academy insignia gleamed on her chest. Her sister Naomi stood nearby, clapping through tears. As Amara walked toward her training aircraft for the very first time, she looked up at the endless blue sky. She whispered to her father's memory, "We made it, Dad. We're finally flying." Amara Johnson's journey began with mockery, but it ended with triumph. She proved that greatness isn't defined by uniforms, wealth, or titles. It's defined by knowledge, courage, and the refusal to let others write your story. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The person you dismiss today might just be the one who saves your life tomorrow. And so, the waitress who once carried trays carried something far greater: the respect of those who mocked her, and the wings of her own destiny. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes one voice of courage can silence a room full of arrogance.